Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, my questions relate to terror financing. I'd like to ask two questions, and I hope to get some precise answers. First question involves information sharing between the United States government and terror financing. Mr. Secretary, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, as it's known by, has two responsibilities, as I understand it. Oversight of financial institutions to prevent money laundering, as well as information sharing among the agencies. With that in mind, it's my understanding that U.S. law enforcement, including U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, have access to FinCEN data, but only can access the database in the case of specific situations, and they must request that there's no information sharing agreement between Treasury and Customs. You know, this seems to me to be very illogical and would impede our ability to be effective, particularly in view of the enormous growth in trade-based money laundering. I would really appreciate a very precise response on the explanation of when this would be corrected and if this can be done without any further legislation.
Congressman, I'd be happy to get back to you on the specific question about what the agreement for data sharing between FinCEN and the Customs and Border Patrol is. In general, there is cooperation with law enforcement entities, but obviously it's within boundaries that to protect the fact that we have access to information that shouldn't be shared broadly. I'd have to check on the specific documentation.
Mr. Secretary, these are two government agencies that are dealing with terrorism and trying to avert that. You have been head of operations in the State Department. You certainly understand the importance of agencies working together. Has it occurred to you to maybe sit down with Secretary Johnson and try to hammer out an agreement?
Well, I do sit down with Secretary Johnson on issues that are brought to my attention that require us to meet. I have to look into this question.
Well, can you suggest to me any reservation that you would have, or why we would not have an agreement, a working agreement between Customs and between the Treasury?
I start out with a strong bias that we ought to work as one government. We ought to cooperate and collaborate, and I've spent most of my career trying to take some of the boundaries and barriers down. So I start out sympathetic.
Mr. Secretary, you said earlier in your testimony that we have very aggressive and effective laws for the banks. You said that we have systems in place for the banks. This seems to be a very prudent system to have in place to be able to identify important data for tracking terrorism financing.
Yeah. So, Congressman, I'm happy to get back to you. It has not been brought to my attention that there has been an issue between Treasury and CPB. I'm happy.
Would you agree with me that there should be an agreement, an information sharing agreement between the two agencies?
I agree there should be cooperation to the maximum extent we can to do our jobs. Because there's sensitive personal information involved here, obviously there are limits. I can't tell you without looking into it.
Okay, I've got one other question. Mr. Secretary, of course, as you know, the terrorists are seeking other ways for their financing. Cybercrime clearly is a major growth industry for them. We continue to identify the hackers. However, they live in jurisdictions like the former Soviet states that we have no extradition treaties. I'm thinking of Ukraine in particular. But I'd like a precise discussion on how we can proceed on with cybercrime extradition there and in similar other countries.
Well, obviously we have taken actions, and some of those legal actions have limits because of extradition. You know, we can't compel extradition where there aren't extradition treaties. What we can do is look at what other tools we have, where we see evidence of cyber crimes, and we're looking to see what other tools we have available.
Regarding the current concerns that we have today, Is it on your agenda to try to work out these extradition agreements with these countries?
Well, obviously, extradition is not my.
As you
yeah.
see the problem,
Yeah.
do you believe that this is something that should be on the agenda?
I would say it's on my agenda to look at what we can do if we don't succeed with extradition. I leave to the Justice Department the question of extradition.
Could you get back with me on this information sharing agreement?
Sure, happy to.